It's time for Screen Junkies Movie Fights.
Hoot hoot, where my owls at? Hashtag Owl Nation, hashtag Movie Fights Live. What's going on, everybody? We're doing it. It's Movie Fights, and we've got three awesome fighters, and this is kind of a special edition of Movie Fights. We're going to do a little bit of a DC-themed Movie Fights, because there's been a lot of DC in the zeitgeist. Is Henry Cavill going to stay or go as Superman? Big new streaming service dropping this Saturday, Batman Day, so we figured, yeah, let's do a little DC action. And we got some awesome comic book heads and just all-around movie fans to talk about it with. First up, he is a senior editor at Nerdist and an acclaimed author and bon vivant. Dan Casey, welcome to the party.
Thank you for mentioning my vivant activities. They've been going quite bon. I really appreciate it.
I know, you viv, you vaunt, you bon around.
Viv, vaunt, vav.
Yes.
Something
okay.
like that.
Now we've turned that phrase into gibberish.
Yes. I mean, who can say it ever was anything but gibberish?
True. The French, maybe.
Yes.
Dan, thanks for being here, brother.
Thank you.
Second, she's no stranger to the DC Universe. In fact, you'll be able to see her on DC Daily on the DC Universe streaming service. Clarke Wolfe.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me.
Always great to have you, Clarke. What's going to go down on DC Daily?
Oh my gosh, so many things. Talking about things, and we're doing it daily.
Wow.
I don't know if you put that together or not. No, we're there's so much great stuff involved and in store. Panels talking about some of your favorite runs of comic books, old shows, new shows. We may or may not be discussing the pilot for the 90s Flash show in roundtable form.
Deep dive.
And lots of coverage on news and things like that. But we're really excited to celebrate Batman Day on Saturday.
Awesome. By the way, any truth to the rumor that it was going to be called DC Talk, but then you got sued by the Christian rock band?
What? No comment.
Okay.
No comment.
I just made that up. But there is a rock band called DC Talk. Last up, and not least up, he is the host of The Meaning of Podcast, and you've seen him on the Schmodown all over the place. Ace Cabrera.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Ace, thanks for coming in, buddy. And what are your feelings about DC Talk and their music?
Oh, DC Talk. I have not heard of DC Talk.
What about DC Comics?
Oh, I love DC. DC is what I grew up on, and it's
Hell yeah.
my favorite. So I'm slightly jealous of Clarke. And by slightly, I mean a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
I am spoiled, admittedly.
Yeah, that
I
sounds
feel
like
very lucky to be a part of that team.
good times. So here on Movie Fights, deciding the fights will be myself and the Dans on the Dan Cam. What up, Dans? First up, we have the fact checker extraordinaire and new Movie Fights champion once again, Dan Murrell. What up, Dan?
Thank you. It's less pressure being over here. By the way, Hal, somebody coined a term for Owl Nation. Owl Nation is getting some momentum, but for the individual members of Owl Nation, and I apologize, I don't forget, Gahooligans.
I was just thinking that.
Yes.
I saw that online, and I think it's hilarious. So perhaps that could collectively be a faction within Owl Nation.
What up, Gahooligans? Yeah. Hashtag Gahooligans.
Yeah.
Listen, by watching this program, you are now a Gahooligan.
Exactly.
Legally.
Yes. That's awesome. I love that. Dan, congrats on your belt-winning victory last week.
Thank you, Hal.
And, she is sent from heaven above to be the conduit and the voice of the people, the delightful Danielle Radford.
Woo! Hello!
So, Dan and I will be weighing in with our votes for the first three questions of Movie Fights, but there will be a poll online, and Danielle, take it away.
So the way that the poll will work, again, there's always really fun polls. If you go to the Movie Fights Live hashtag on Twitter, please participate there, because I'll be in there checking for things as well. The only poll that counts is the one that is on YouTube. If you don't know how this works, click down in the description below. Feel free to ask us in the chat. We'll all be able to kind of guide you through that. And so when these two are locked up, that poll becomes the tie-breaking vote. So very exciting, but we'll be reading all of your answers no matter what. We do that until the speed round, until I have to actually start having an opinion, which boo town. And then on Movie Fights Live hashtag on Twitter, please drop in there any other answers you have. We've been getting some really interesting, intricate threads that I keep trying to make sure that I point out. So please go ahead and drop those in there. And also, all your dank memes. memes.
Yeah, sick memes, dank memes, dope memes. We had some awesome owl stuff. We had a couple weeks ago a great one of someone put a surfer on Joe Starr's hair. Joe Starr's beautiful wavy hair could hold a surfer. Danielle, thank you so much. So just a reminder how our little dog and pony show works over here. The first fighter to achieve 4 points wins. 3 regular round questions. Then we go to the speed round, and someone can be down 3-0 going into the speed round and take the whole thing with a comeback victory. It's anybody's game. You guys ready to do some damage?
Ready?
Ready as I'll ever be.
JTE, deliver the package.
Prepare to die. Ladies and gentlemen. No.
It's main event time.
Thank you, Thor. Okay. We're going to start off our DC-themed movie fights with a DCEU question right here. What DCEU movie most deserves a do-over? Now, this could be anything from a casting change, a director change, a script change, anything you want. And we're not necessarily saying it's a terrible movie or the movie was a failure on X, Y, and Z levels. We're just saying take one of these movies, which we know I've gotten a lot of heat for criticizing, like Batman v Superman, for example, because, they have a strong fan base. But so we're saying, okay, everything aside, it's not necessarily a terrible movie, but what would you change? What movie would you do something different with, do a do-over? All right, and we will start with player number 1, Dan Casey.
All right, folks. Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice is a terrible movie. It failed on X, Y, and Z levels, but I have the solution. First of all, change the watermelon, change the Jolly Rancher to a watermelon. Who eats a cherry Jolly Rancher? No wonder that senator didn't want it. Make the Granny's peach tea scene even longer if you're going to go for that level of surrealist comedy. Just lean into it really hard. Make that like a 20-minute scene. But more importantly, ditch Doomsday. This is a storyline that you did not earn. It's like how the X-Men is trying to do the Dark Phoenix saga yet again. Do something a little lower stakes. You can still have Batman fight against Superman, have Lex Luthor be pulling the strings behind the scenes, maybe have Brainiac involved, or OMAC, or Brother Eye make it about surveillance. So you have the surveillance state where Batman's worried about this sort of like larger-than-life alien figure who can punch through literally anything, and just make it feel a little bit more grounded so it's something that you've earned. You can still have the Wonder Woman cameo. It's not a bad idea in concept, but the execution was sloppier than Superman snapping Zod's neck in Man of Steel. Basically, also turn up the brightness at least 50%. It is the darkest movie tonally and literally.
All right, thank you, Dan. Clark?
All right, so I have got Suicide Squad. So here's the thing that I think is the most interesting about Suicide Squad is that we all know villains are interesting. I think we're going to be having this debate in just a round or two, but I will save that for then. Fans are interested in villains. We're compelled by them. They are oftentimes some of the most fun and interesting and entertaining characters to watch on screen. In addition to that, you do have David Ayer involved. Now, I feel if we'll all remember, David Ayer wrote the screenplay for Training Day, which I would argue is one of the more interesting explorations of a villain on screen in recent memory. And in addition to that, you have Harley, you have the Joker, you have some iconic characters that are either re-emerging on the big screen or making their debut on the big screen. All the pieces are there. The tone is what was off. For whatever reason, this movie tonally is all over the place. It's not quite funny enough and charming enough to be maybe the lighter, more summer blockbuster fare, but it's also not dark enough and twisted enough to be that in-depth exploration of villains and these iconic villains that I feel like we need. And so my argument is Suicide Squad with most of the pieces in place, but with a big tonal shift.
Thank you, Clark. Ace?
The DCEU movie that most deserves a do-over is the movie that was barely finished, and that is Justice League. Justice League is a movie that a lot of people were looking forward to their entire lives, to see the biggest superhero team-up of all time finally on the screen, with characters that we actually do know, like Wonder Woman, like Superman, and in Batman v Superman, we met these characters and Ben Affleck's Batman. But what we got instead was the most studio note heavy movie that we've seen. We got director mishappenings behind the scenes. We got chaos as far as casting. And this movie truly deserves another chance. And by that chance, I mean taking all the pieces that were already in there and letting the director complete his vision. And by the director, yes, I do mean Zack Snyder. And yes, I do mean a continuation of Batman v Superman, which a lot of people liked. And there was a lot of fans of those movies. So I truly feel like if they embraced that dark universe that they were going for, you could have gotten a movie that a lot of fans would appreciate. And instead what we got was the DCE universe trying to be Marvel and failing completely.
Gotcha. All right, fight it out, y'all.
All right, let me start with Suicide Squad. You say that it needs a tonal shift, but I think that you're underestimating a large part of the marketplace. People that wear Jinko jeans and vapes with googly eyes deserve to see themselves represented on the big screen. So I think to say that Suicide Squad missed the mark tonally is missing the mark from an argument standpoint. And also, in terms of Justice League, I think that it was one of the more successful experiments in the DCEU. It was mercifully brief. It struck a tone that hadn't been seen before. You get the elements of Snyder's darkness, but then you get some of the levity that I think was missing because these characters, look, we've seen Zack Snyder's vision for conservatively 5 to 10 years now, and it just the sum parts didn't make a total that was worth watching. So I think that they needed to find a happy, like a sort of a middle ground, and I think they found that with Justice League, and they're gonna get a do-over in Justice League 2.
See, you wanted to take out the best part of Batman v Superman. If you ask fans walking out of that theater, what was your favorite part? They would say
Superman having fun at the end.
When Wonder Woman came
for the first time in the entire franchise.
And the score hit, and it's Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman fighting Doomsday. That is a blast. And everyone came out of the movie on a high note because they remembered that third act being like, well, that's a lot of fun because those are my 3 favorite characters of all time finally teaming up and fighting a big bad villain. And that's the fun part of Batman v Superman, and you're taking out the fun part of the movie.
No, I'm not taking out the fun part. I'm taking out the dumb part that they're fighting. There's no reason they should be fighting Doomsday and killing Superman in that movie. People left the theater seeing dirt suddenly rise off of Superman's coffin after his funeral. That's not a high note. That's a horrifying note.
Yeah,
it's
and also
rising because he's gonna rise again.
Or he's a zombie.
No, he's rising again.
I don't know. I think that, oh boy, this is very hard to argue in the current situation that I am in.
So that's it, huh?
I was very interested to hear Clark's arguments against these movies.
What was your thing again? No, I'm just kidding. I think, look, Dan, at the end, I don't disagree for you. Fuck, never mind. Keep going, boys. I'll jump in when I'm ready.
Suicide Squad didn't hold as much weight as the Justice League does.
No.
Justice League is one of the most, it's the greatest superhero team up. Obviously we have the Avengers, but Justice League, whether it be in the comics, whether it be in the animated series, we've seen the greatness of what can be with the Justice League. And Suicide Squad simply doesn't have that name recognizableness. People don't know what it is. The general audience doesn't know what it is. Sure, there's a lot of potential there, but a failure in the Suicide Squad is an acceptable failure. And a failure in the greatest superhero team up of ever is not an acceptable failure. And to call it a failure is true because at the end of the day, your movie made 166 million opening weekend. Your movie made 132 opening weekend. My movie couldn't even crack 100, and it's the greatest superhero team up of all time. As much as critics want to target the DC movies and say they're bad movies, at the end of the day, Batman v Superman has a lot of fans. Suicide Squad has a lot of fans. Whereas Justice League, the fans didn't turn out, and the critics didn't really care for it either. It's the biggest failure that we've had as far as the DCEU goes.
I don't know about that because I feel like Justice League, when we saw Jared Leto, bringing the Joker back on the big screen post Heath Ledger was a huge deal. And I think that whether or not I think fans were excited for that. Now, yes, the initial pictures were controversial, and the version of the Joker that they decided to go with was controversial. But in the end, when you are introducing Harley Quinn on screen for the first time and you're reintroducing the Joker with an Academy Award-winning actor, I feel like that is I feel like what happened in Justice League was a failure because they weren't able to really explore the dark side of these characters and had to sort of pivot to a lighter tone.
Was it a lighter tone though? Because we've had there was some dark scenes in that movie, and there was a dark scenes with the Joker, with Harley. There was hints at an abusive relationship. There was some pretty dark themes inside Suicide Squad. Amanda Waller was like a savage,
for a
and it's
PG-13.
Viola Davis.
Well, I'm saying that I would push it. I think that we need to push it to the R rating. We need to take these, let these DC villains actually be villains. And even if it wasn't the R rating, a hard PG-13 is tonally where we missed.
I want to go back to you saying that I think arguing that Justice League was a failure and needs a redo is kind of a flawed premise without redoing the movies that came before it.
I agree.
The reason that Justice League doesn't work the same way that the Avengers worked is because they were trying to make up 8 years of movies in a single film. They were always going to have this be a loss for them. This is meant to be a platform to showcase these different characters, and then they can spring them off into bold new directions. They were always sort of batting from behind, and here they can make up some lost ground. So I think that if you want to redo Justice League the way that you're talking about, it's an impossible task without redoing the other movies that came before it.
I disagree. If anything, it's a continuation of that task. We had Man of Steel, we had Batman v Superman, Wonder Woman, all coming into Justice League. Those were the 3 movies that came before it, and those were the 3 movies leading into it. What I'm saying is, what's done is done in Man of Steel. If people didn't like it, that's fine. A lot of people did. What's done is done in Batman vs. Superman. If people didn't like it, that's fine. A lot of people did. What I'm saying is respect the fans that actually like Batman v Superman and like Wonder Woman and like Man of Steel and want to see a continuation in the tone and the story of what Zack Snyder created. And he didn't get the chance to do that because they reshot most of the movie, didn't finish the CGI, rushed the product out on the screen that the WB executives thought that they would like because it's like Marvel, we can make money like Marvel. It's like, no, what we came in for was the dark and gritty Zack Snyder universe, and what we're getting instead is Joss Whedon taking the handle of this and trying to do Marvel with DC characters inside a DC universe that Zack Snyder created. I want to see the Justice League that Zack Snyder wanted to make.
Oh, go ahead.
The only thing Justice League deserves to have redone is to not have Paramount flex on them so Henry Cavill could keep his mustache, which admittedly looked great in Mission Impossible.
That's another
Fallout.
great. You're giving me
That's
more
the
reason.
only thing you should
But that's
redo
another
about
reason
that.
why we
Otherwise,
need a
just
do-over.
take it.
That's another reason why we need a do-over. The stash was awful. It's unbearable. Stashgate is real, and a do-over would get rid of that.
All right, I'd love to hear everybody's final thoughts. Let's start with Dan. Go ahead and make your closing arguments here.
Look, you've heard my opponents. I wish they could redo their arguments, but the answer is clear. Batman v Superman was sort of the linchpin. It was the chance to introduce a larger universe, and it introduced elements, but not in the way that it should have. It failed on every conceivable level, but it could have been salvaged, and unfortunately it wasn't, and just proceeded to create a sort of domino effect for the rest of the DCEU.
I think that Ace said it best. You know, with the DCEU and the Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman movies, they do have their fans. Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Justice League. But the side movies is where you can take the more creative risks. And I think that the pieces were in place for Suicide Squad to take those risks. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, it didn't quite go one way or the other. So that's why Suicide Squad, more than anything, clean break, needs to have a redo.
Thank you, Clark. Ace?
Batman v Superman introduced us to a massive audience, and $873 million is a big win, not a failure, in my opinion. And also, Suicide Squad is a side quest movie. If anything, if it's a failure, that's fine. We can accept that. And it also has a lot of fans, whereas Justice League failed at the box office, failed critically, and we weren't able to see the full completion of the DC universe, what they were trying to do, which was different than Marvel. And instead, what we got was a poor imitation of Marvel.
Thank you. All right, that's our fight right there. Ding, ding. Dan Murrell, facts, what's going on?
Well, Hal, we tried. Yeah, I mean, it's very opinion-based round.
Yes.
Not a whole lot of factual adjustments on my end. So really,
Okay.
it's just kind of listening to the arguments and weighing my own opinion through a lot of that.
Great. Dan, thank you for 0 facts. All right. So, Dan's absolutely right on the point that it was very opinion-based and just varying opinions on the whole DCEU. This was really fun and fascinating to listen to. Clark coming from one perspective, Ace, and then Dan, especially Ace and Dan going back on Batman v Superman. Just varying opinions there.
It's not that bad.
Dan, very funny, swipes at Vape Nation and Junko Jeans, and you definitely had me laughing the most. But I feel like your black and white view of Batman v Superman discounted a lot of what Ace was talking about. It does have a huge fan base, and critics aside, personal taste aside, there's no getting around that. Clark, I felt like we were trying to step carefully around certain points. I like the idea of a hard R or a darker tone that's R-rated, but at the end of the day, Ace really combined just the technical aspects of the movie and his passion as a fan, and that really, I found that so compelling. Just hearing about wanting to see Justice League, this amazing team up, and not just the flaws of the movie, but the disappointment in that regard. Ace takes the point from me. Dan.
Yeah. Casey. Casey's making a face at me.
I feel like everybody had a very strong basis of their argument. Dan obviously was actually Dan and Ace and Clark. All three of them were arguing from a very strong base of emotion coming from different levels. So it was kind of a wash for me on that, and so it really had to go for listening to the arguments for who laid out the best case. And I really do feel like, as much as I could feel Dan's disdain for Batman v Superman, looking at the question overall, I feel like Ace really laid out a very good case about what had been laid out before, the fact that it was tonally different, that it was completely inconsistent, that you're fulfilling a vision, that yes, it is a very derided group of films. However, there are fans out there that enjoyed it, and that swayed me. So I'm also going to have to go with Ace.
All right, Ace, you take the point. And and I neglected to mention, you had box office numbers at your fingertips. I mean, are those just in your brain?
Yes, I'm a box office nerd.
A little bit impressive, a little bit scary. Danielle, what's the internet have to say? The poll.
Well, 53% for Justice League. Batman v Superman at 30% and Suicide Squad at 16%. I would say of the other ones that people were recommending, overwhelming, people want both Catwoman and Green Lantern to get another shot.
Oh.
We weren't allowed to pick those.
I know, but that's, they want it to be taken in and...
All right, you can remake Catwoman as long as you keep that basketball scene.
Yes.
Non-negotiable.
Quick cuts.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. All right, so it is 1-0 Ace going into question numero dos. Ooh, man, this is a good one. All right. So, who gives the best performance in any DC movie ever? Best performance in any DC movie ever. This is question number 2. Start with player number 2, Clark.
All right, so here we go. I actually really love this question. So as I mentioned earlier, villains are compelling. They're compelling to watch on screen. They're compelling for many, many reasons. And I know, where's my camera? Here. I know what you guys at home are screaming at your computer. Hey, Ledger, Dark Knight, Dark Knight, Dark Knight. We know. I am not going to win you guys. I know this. But for our esteemed judges in the room, I present to you Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman in Batman Returns. Now, yes, the picture that we are seeing up here is an iconic image. We all remember how excellent and amazing Michelle Pfeiffer was once she got into the cat suit, absolutely. But the thing that really stands out to me about this performance is the true arc that she experiences. If you go back and you watch Batman Returns, you can watch Michelle Pfeiffer's performance as Selina Kyle grow and evolve and change. We're talking about real issues that whether you're a superhero, a supervillain, or a regular person or not, women experience. She's bullied by her boss. She feels like a failure. She feels like a loser and has this incredible coming into her own womanhood throughout the course of this film. There's some of the best acting on display. I will cite many scenes when we get into it. I don't want to take up too much time here, but I would argue that Michelle Pfeiffer gives the best performance. Maybe not the coolest performance, and maybe not your favorite performance, but she gives the best performance in any DC movie ever.
All right. All about that Fife life, Clark. Thank you. Ace.
Before Robert Downey Jr., before Chris Hemsworth, before all these superhero actor icons, we had the very first one, and that is Christopher Reeve's Superman. Now, it is very, very difficult to embody a character that we haven't seen on screen before. And of course, we had the superhero Superman TV show way back in the day, but from everything else that we're going on, we're basing it off the comics. And I truly believe that taking a character from a comic book and acting that on screen and giving your own interpretation of a character is very, very, very difficult to do, and he didn't have a lot to base it on. So what we imagine Superman now, when we read a Superman comic book, what we see from other Supermans that have come in, whether it be Tom Welling or Henry Cavill, is Christopher Reeve. That's the bar we measure everything else on, is Christopher Reeve Superman, and I feel like he embodies the character more than anyone else.
Thank you, Ace. Back around to Dan.
Folks, I've heard you screaming at your laptops and your computers,
There it is.
and I gotta tell you, the best performance in any DC movie ever is Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. It's a performance that's so good, it killed him. It's a performance that's so good, it ruined most DC movies that followed it. They took the wrong notes from his performance and that movie, which is so defined by Heath Ledger's performance at the Joker. He showed us a side of this clown prince of crime that we had not seen before. He brought a new darkness, a new depth, a new complexity to a character that can often be sort of, I don't know, so a little bit jovial, a little bit murderous, but he was weird. He was unsettling. He is a wild card in every scene in which you see him, and at the end of the day, he teaches you a valuable magic trick about hiding your pencils.
All right, fight it out, y'all.
I feel like, guys, at the end of the day, what you guys are arguing for are most iconic performances. When we talk about best performances, when we talk about actual acting, I love Christopher Reeve as Superman. I grew up watching those movies. They are in my DNA. But let's be real, 2.5 of the 4 are stinkers. And so I don't think that Christopher Reeve, incredible actor that he was, ever got to really show and really have those actor moments in his time as Superman.
Oh, I disagree highly. I feel like, if anything, Christopher Reeve is not just iconic, but the performance he gives is what we relate as Superman. And when I feel like we talk about DC performance, we're talking about these characters. We're not talking simply about, you know, acting, but it's acting as Superman. It's acting as the Joker or Catwoman. And I feel like no one acted as Superman as much as Christopher Reeves. He embodied that character more than anyone else.
Well, but you might be arguing time and place, because I would say that the Superman that I think we all know and love is struggling in the 2000s because we as a society are having a lot of problems with masculinity and not equating violence. Like, I think at the end of the day, Chris Reeve was the right Superman at the right time, and that was the right time for Superman. What we're struggling with now are all of those things, but I don't necessarily, just because he was right place, right time, it doesn't mean that it was the best performance.
He was certainly the best Superman, but he's not the best performance in any DC movie, and while Michelle Pfeiffer gives a great performance as Catwoman, she is also not the best performer in any DC movie. 2 words: Academy Awards. Heath Ledger won the Oscar for this. You said that it's more difficult to portray a character you haven't seen before. I would argue it's more difficult to overcome the expectations when people have so much attachment to these characters. How hard is it for every Superman after Christopher Reeves to stack up to him the same way that Heath Ledger had to overcome Jack Nicholson, Cesar Romero, all these people who grew up with these different characters they have attachments to?
But what you're talking about is redefining a character, which nobody has yet to do with Chris Reeve. But in terms of, so yes, I would agree that Heath Ledger absolutely redefined the Joker for probably the foreseeable future. And yes, you're right, he did get an Oscar for that performance, but let's not forget that was during a time in the Academy when people were saying Dark Knight deserves an Oscar nomination. It was for Best Picture. It was snubbed in that category, which led to the Academy adding the 10 Best Picture nominees back. So while I do agree that Heath Ledger is iconic in that role, I think that his Oscar win in terms of the politics of the Academy Awards was probably giving a consolation prize to The Dark Knight, because the Academy wouldn't pull their heads out of their asses and actually give it the Best Picture nomination that it deserved.
Well, before Heath Ledger's performance, we had other dark and gritty characters. We had Ian McKellen's Magneto in the X-Men movies. We have basis for it. I kind of disagree with what you're saying, because I really do feel like if we see we're going to have another James Bond, we can have the embrace of saying, oh, we're going to have another James Bond, we're going to have another Joker. If anything, I can go back and take what I like from certain James Bonds and put that into my performance. Heath Ledger can take what he liked from Jack Nicholson, he can take what he liked from Mark Hamill and say, this is what I'm going to come up with. I'm going to come up with something new, but he's still taking from it. Whereas I feel Christopher Reeves is literally trying to embody a character that he knows from the comic books and what people imagine, taking from people's imagination of what a character can be, and he's embodying that character to the fullest extent.
He had 40 years of stories to base that off of. Excuse me,
Yes.
39 years of stories.
He also had George Reeves' performance, which was a huge hit and which was iconic at that time. So just because Superman hadn't been on the big screen, he had absolutely been portrayed in real life on the small
It's a
screen.
completely different time period of superhero films now, and we're coming before the eras that you guys are talking about. A very different time period where superhero films are now embraced, and everyone knows what a superhero performance is. Whereas Christopher Reeves, it's like there's not a lot out there.
Superman was a gigantic hit.
Of course it
It
was.
won
because
3
of Christopher
Oscars.
Reeves.
So I want to just throw out there that we've been talking a lot about superhero movies, and we've been talking a lot about the comic book aspect of it all. And for me, the thing that really stands out the most, as opposed to both of your arguments about Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman in Batman Returns, is that we get to see her inside the costume and outside of the costume. We get to see the complexities of Selina Kyle when she is Selina Kyle before the inciting incident that changes her character, and after, on top of when we get to see her as the villain in the costume. There is a scene in Batman Returns where, and this is the other part, her counterpart, I would argue that the relationship between Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne and Michelle Pfeiffer's Selina Kyle is the best portrayal of that relationship we've ever seen. The scene at the Christmas party at the end of the movie, they're not even in costume, and there is this insanely beautiful exchange between the two of them where you understand the whole essence of Batman and whatever villain he's fighting, whether it is the Joker or whether it is Catwoman. The idea that they know exactly who the other one is and what are they going to do about it, and there is real emotion, there is real acting. This is a scene that could be out of any tragic love story.
Go ahead and roll this into your final thoughts,
Okay.
Clark.
So at the end of the day, I think what Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman really portrayed and showed us was that we see the arc, we see the before, we see the during, and we see the after. We also see the differences of her inside the costume and outside the costume. We never see Heath Ledger not be at 11, for lack of a better term. And while, yes, 11 is super interesting and really fun and super fucking cool, and it is iconic, and yours is iconic, I would argue that there is a difference between iconic and best, and that's why Michelle Pfeiffer as Catwoman is the best overall performance in a DC movie.
All right, thanks, Clark. Ace, hit us with your final thoughts.
Christopher Reeve did do 2 different performances, and that is Clark Kent and Superman. And we get to see this type of performance of seeing what defines Clark Kent and what defines Superman. And that's the charm, the grace, the attitude, the kindness that he shows, the strength that he shows. And that is what Superman is. That is what we still see Superman as today, and that is what we saw Superman as back in 1978. We imagine this type of Superman because of Christopher Reeves. When we imagine other characters, such as the Joker, such as Batman, we can have a Michael Keaton, we can have a Heath Ledger, we can have a Jack Nicholson, whereas Christopher Reeves has not been able to be topped because of how great his performance is. And I do think there is something to say as far as greatest DC performance. And greatest DC performance is embodying that character to the fullest extent, and that is Christopher Reeve's Superman.
Thank you, Ace. Background, Dan, closing argument.
Heath Ledger operates at an 11 in The Dark Knight because it is the highest and therefore best number. What's the word in front of his Oscar? Best. That's because he was the best in any DC movie, period. Folks, you talk about how you're going to hear both our actors, they play 2 different sides of the same character. You see a bunch of different shades of Joker within that movie. You see multiple facets of his madness. He challenges Batman. He forces Batman to reconcile with the very core of his vigilante identity, and that is because of the strength of Heath Ledger's performance. He has made it so that the Joker is a role that cannot be attempted by another actor without impossible amounts of scrutiny, more so than Superman, more so than Catwoman, more so than any other character in all of DC Comics lore.
Time. Wow. Okay. Great arguments all around. Dan, hit us with the facts and then chime in with your decision on this question.
Sure. Well, one fact, I hate, well, I guess my job is correcting people, but it's George Reeves and Christopher Reeve. The S was dropped alternately on and off throughout the fight. So yeah, Christopher Reeve, George Reeves. Just one of those weird cosmic things with the character of Superman. Yeah, man, this is a very. I mean, if we could declare a tie, we should just do that, but we can't. We don't do that anymore. So let's not, because that's not the point of the show. It's to figure out who won.
Yep.
Wow. I think that. I mean, if you're these are the three. I think maybe Nicholson you might throw in there as well. I think that
Jesse Eisenberg.
I think that if I'm judging not just on arguments for, but arguments against. I heard that. If I'm judging based on arguments for and against, I think that consistently Clark was more consistent both in her arguments for her choice and against Dan and Ace's choices. So I'm going to have to go with Clark based on that. I think that she had the most well-rounded fight of the three of them, so I'm going with Clark.
Yeah, I agree. This is so hard, and I feel like these are the three. These are the three. Ace, you hit us with how hard it was to tackle this character without as much precedent. But I felt like that. I don't know, I wasn't as impressed with that as the criteria. And taking that out of the argument, I feel like there wasn't as much, even though, Christopher Reeve was perfect. Like, he was the man. I couldn't imagine anyone doing it first. But just as far as best performance, I just didn't feel swayed. It really came down to these two. And, if you ask me off the top of my head, I would say Heath Ledger's Joker all day, every day. It's the coolest. I want to be it for Halloween. I want to be it every day. I want to quote it every day. I want to just quote it right now incessantly. Why so serious? I can't help myself. But in the point-by-point breakdown with specific scenes and specific qualities in the acting, going by solely the argument alone. Clark, you swayed me to Catwoman, and I agree with Dan. Clark Wolfe takes the point. Danielle, tell us how much Heath Ledger was ahead by in the poll.
Well, Heath Ledger won by 50%, with Michelle Pfeiffer at 36%, and Christopher Reeve, which we wrote as Christopher Reeves.
Shame.
It's fine. And look, guys, we're human. We're not robots.
I am a fact-checking robot, Danielle, and it's gonna haunt me.
You are a fact-checking robot.
I am a fact-checking robot.
Were there any other choices from the World Wide Web?
Well, this one I know y'all just said because you know I would appreciate it, so I'm going to go ahead and say a lot of Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. I know that was just for me and to get me to say it, and you're right.
Great performance.
You won. And Margot Kidder got a lot, which for me was also. Margot Kidder is my Lois Lane.
She's so good.
Yeah. She passed recently, and she also. Those two. Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder together, an iconic screen duo.
Well, I'm surprised we didn't get any Shaq for Steel.
He is right here on set with us tonight.
Yes.
Oh, we definitely.
Tiny Shaq.
Yeah, we got like one or two Shaqs from Steel. Again, people know what I will say by
from
now.
a dummy account.
From Totally Not Shaq.
From Kazam 69.
Shaq is watching movie fights right now with his burner account in his hand. Dan, it pained me not to give you that point because
you had the power.
I know.
The people know the truth.
The people do know the truth.
It's betrayed by Dan's all day long. Is this because I wrote a book about Avengers and not about DC?
It's about the arguments. It's about the arguments.
Yep. At the end of the day,
I think ultimately I've disagreed with the choices of the last two people I gave the points to, but it's about the arguments.
Yep.
That's how it goes.
But great arguments all around, and that was not an easy decision to make. All right, it's one for Ace, one for Clark. Dan, looking to get on the board. Going
Sure
to question
am.
number 3.
Oh boy.
And question 3 is, okay, so, the Conjure verse. Is it called the Conjuring verse? The Conjure verse?
The
Conjuring Universe,
The Conjuring Universe.
The Conjuring
apparently.
Universe. The Nun ruled the box office last weekend, and Conjuring 3 is still on the table. So we ask, what DC character adaptation would make the best horror movie? Oh, this is a fun, weird question. What DC character adaptation would make the best horror film? And we're going to start off with player number 3, Ace.
When you think horror and you think DC, you think of one character that embodies this and one character that literally faces off against hell, and that is John Constantine from DC Comics, created by Alan Moore. John Constantine literally battles demons, faces off against different dimensions, and has horrific encounters with very, very dark themes inside these comic books, especially the Hellblazer comics and the Hellblazer series. It is incredible, it is gritty, it is powerful, it is disturbing, and that is what we need in a horror movie.
All right, thank you, Ace. Back around to Dan. Who do you like?
Now, I chose an unconventional one for this, and that is Hawkman, the hero who has been reborn throughout time, because I think you can tell a really interesting story here. He has the reincarnation aspect, constantly born into a body in a world he doesn't understand. There's the time travel element you could bring in, seeing Hawkman throughout the ages, but then you tie in like these ancient Egyptian curses. You can really bring that in, have some elements of things like the mummy, make it Lovecraftian and lean into those horrible things he's probably had to encounter. Alien beings, scarabs, all sorts of nightmare stuff. So it's kind of like an occult Indiana Jones element, but really leaning into the horror aspect in a way that doesn't feel trite or hackneyed or has been done before.
All right, Dan with Hawkman. Clark.
Well, I am going with a character that I've been dying to see on the big screen, and she's friends with John Constantine, and that is Zatanna. So Zatanna is one of my favorite characters in all the DC comics because, for lots of reasons. One of them is magic. There's lots of magic at play with Zatanna. There's death, there's darkness, and what I like so much about, and there's the supernatural, but what I like so much about Zatanna is that I feel like while I would love to see her on the big screen in a Justice League Dark adaptation or hanging out with the other members of the DCU, I think that she can stand alone. I think that we could actually have a solo horror movie adventure starring Zatanna and just watch her go. And I think those things would make up, have the horror, she already has the horror elements built in to make a great horror movie. So I'm gonna go Zatanna.
Oh boy, 3 very different answers. Fight it out, you guys.
I mean, Ace, I love you, but do I need to say it? We've already seen a Constantine movie, and it got the R rating. And listen, by the way, I like Constantine with Keanu. It's fun, it's silly, it's not a great adaptation, of course. But at the end of the day, we saw it try to make a dark horror movie with it, and it didn't really work.
Well, here's the thing, Clark. I mean, as you're working for DC, so you know they have the animated show as well.
Yes.
We've had Matt Ryan play Constantine
Right.
in the series, and we've had Keanu Reeves. The reason why this character keeps coming back is because he's so great.
He is
Obviously,
cool.
we haven't been able to truly capture what Alan Moore was doing in the Hellblazer comics, but the reason why he keeps coming back, just like a Batman, just like a Superman, just like any other big major Marvel or DC character, is because we want to see a different interpretation. We want to see the interpretation that truly disturbs and horrifies you, and that's what we can get from a Constantine movie. Everything that we've talked about now, whether it be The Conjuring, whether it be Hereditary, all these movies taking off, Babadook, that demonic, supernatural eeriness that we see in these movies, these small independent horror movies, are what take you in. And Constantine literally battles demons. How cool would it be to see a low-budget horror Constantine movie where he has to battle a demon in a very psychological, disturbing kind of way that we've seen in these movies that have had a lot of success? I feel like it will not only be successful, but it will be very compelling and interesting to see a guy who faces off against demons, battle demons in a much more grounded sense and not a fantastical sense like a Zatanna would be. My problem with Zatanna is that she's very fantastical and that she doesn't really have the horror elements that a Constantine has.
You can only call Constantine grounded if you're literally Johnny fucking Rotten. That's the only way, because he's Johnny Rotten who uses a Necronomicon to fight demons. He's more like darkly comedic, dealing with the occult and the supernatural. There's a reason he keeps getting brought back, because they can't get him right. Maybe that's because he's better suited for a comic book and not a horror movie, not an animated series. If you want to go with the reincarnation angle that actually works, why not go with Hawkman? Do something that hasn't been done before. Take a chance on something that hasn't failed 2.5 times already.
Well, I noticed, Dan, in your opening argument, you referenced The Mummy, saying that Hawkman could be like The Mummy. And I don't know if you saw The Mummy that came out a couple of years ago.
I'm talking about the Brendan Fraser one.
Well,
I'm not talking about the dark universe.
Yeah, well,
Well, even that one, people have struggled to get the Mummy right. How are you going to get a Hawkman right? Not only that, but the fact that Hawkman doesn't have any horror elements within it, where at least Zatanna has some horror elements and Constantine is all horror. For me, the question asks horror. What would make the best horror movie? And we keep seeing success of horror movies with demons. Like I said before, Hereditary, Conjuring. Demons are the awful, awful thing that you don't want to face off against. And I challenge your point, Dan, because I really do feel like making Constantine grounded is the most... That idea in itself should be the greatest idea, because how great would it be to finally take a character as huge and over the top as Constantine is, bring him down to a low budget and make him face off against something that is much more personal, much more psychological. I think that is a great, great movie that would happen in a horror franchise.
Ace, you should have picked Dr. Midnight, because like him, you lack vision. That is something that we've seen time and time again. You could swap in any character in any horror movie over the last 25 years that's been in a similar demon hunting situation, including Keanu Reeves, and you just get something that we've seen before. Look, Zatanna, what she has going for her is that she has not been seen before, but neither is Hawkman in a horror setting. This is a chance to redefine a character that has been sort of pushed to the side, that has been sort of ridiculed. There was a Hawkman movie in development many, many years ago, but it got shelved because they couldn't crack the code. Well, guess what? I cracked it. Make it spooky.
Does anyone even want to see a Hawkman? If
Dan
anything, they
does,
want to see a
apparently.
Hawk Girl. Hawk Girl is even way more iconic than Hawk Girl.
I'm so glad that you're talking about girls and horror movies. So let's get back to Zatanna, because at the end of the day, I would love to see a character like Zatanna, who, yes, happens to be a woman, on the big screen. I think we have seen a lot of our favorite male superheroes, including Constantine, like a million times, get their moment in the sun. Now, yes, we have not seen Hawkman in that atmosphere, yes, yet. But speaking to the question of a great horror movie. Now, I don't profess to know everything about what makes a great horror movie, but as you all know, I am a huge horror fan. And I would argue that what consistently makes a great horror movie is characters that you care about at the center of the scares. And that's why I think that Zatanna is such a great choice. She is such an emotional character. Every time I read any of her arcs, I care so much about her. I'm so emotionally invested in her, whether it's her challenges with her father, or coming into her own identity or her own relationships. This is a character who we would be emotionally invested in. The supernatural, the demons, the magic, that all comes second in any great horror movie, and that's why Zatanna is the best choice.
I feel like Zatanna doesn't have that connection towards the supernatural elements as much as Constantine does, because for me, Zatanna, I like Zatanna as well, and I feel like she has that much more traditional magic show kind of feel, and whether that's kind of the origin of her character as well. Sure, now in the new DC Comics now, she's taken a much more supernatural tone, but Zatanna still, at the end of the day, is simple magic spells and much more Harry Potter than a dark and gritty horror movie that we would get from a Constantine. And at the end of the day, I don't know what Hawkman is facing. I don't know what Zatanna is facing. I know what Constantine is facing, and it's hell on earth, and it's disturbing, and it's evil, and it's awful. And you talked at the end of the day about horror movies that we've seen. The reason why these horror movies are so successful is because they're good. And at the end of the day, people are watching them. And people want to see demons on screen. And Constantine has that edge.
All right, I want to pose a question to the three of you. Take a moment and think about it. Who would you cast as your titular character, and just give me like a 2-sentence plot synopsis of your horror film, okay? Take a moment. Let's have a little thinking music. Okay, that's all we can time we have. All right, let's start with Ace.
Playing the role of Constantine, I'll have Dan Stevens. From
Okay.
Legion. Dan Stevens is a chameleon. He can embody any character. He's already British. Constantine is British already. And I feel like he's a character who already has an edge to him. And imagine Constantine in a low-budget horror film where a family that has been attacked by demons for years throughout their life. And Constantine is coming into this house and has to have a personal connection with this family. Because like Clark said, a personal connection with these characters is what truly makes a great horror movie. If we have that personal connection with Constantine, who has already battled demons, and by battling demons, I mean a psychological turn. Because when you battle demons, it does have an effect on your mental state. So we have the mental health aspect as well. So Constantine has to save this family from a demon that has been tackling it for years.
All right, thank you, Ace. Background to Dan.
The year is 1915. Carter Hall, as portrayed by award-winning actor Oscar Isaac, is plunging into an Egyptian tomb. But what he finds there is more than he bargained for, because he learns an essential and horrifying truth about himself. He is not who he thought he was. He is doomed to live this cycle of endless death and rebirth for all eternity, doomed by some sort of sinister force that he does not understand and cannot possibly know, but he must know the truth. And what he finds down there is monsters, mayhem. We see Oscar Isaac as Hawkman throughout time trying to overcome this sinister supernatural force plaguing him, so at long last he can find peace and return to his lady love at long last.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Clark.
In my Zatanna adaptation, the gorgeous and insanely talented Gemma Chan is going to be playing the title role. Okay, so the premise is there's a mystery surrounding the death and disappearance of her father, and she is compelled, and of course her father taught her everything that she knows, and she is carrying on the mantle, so she has to uncover what has happened to her father and face the hard and scary truths about what she might find along the way.
All right. Wow. Time. Okay. There we have it. What a throwdown. Dan.
Yes.
Facts. Where are we at?
Not really. No, not so much. No, everyone seemed pretty confident and clear on their picks. So, no facts to check, Hal.
Great. Thank you, sir. Wow. This is a real nail biter. This one. You all had a lot of interesting stuff. I loved all of your pitches. I would greenlight all of those movies.
We're rich.
Yeah. My green light means nothing. Shoot. Man, you know what? Ace, I felt like they hit you a couple of times on we've seen Constantine on the big screen, and I felt that took a little wind out of the sails of the argument there. Clark, you had a lot of good points, but I feel like, the unconventional choice of Hawkman, I don't know, it was weird, it was interesting, and then you painted a picture where it could survive in the horror genre. Like, I was really doubting it, but that was a compelling film, and if you sent him into that, into those elements in a tomb, yeah. At the end of the day, this was really a toss-up because you were all so great. But Dan swayed me at the end there. Also, his Dr. Midnight slam on Ace was pretty epic. So, I go Dan this round. Dan Murrell?
Yeah, all three of these rounds have been very close, very difficult to judge. I think that Ace's pick was probably the easiest fit out of all three of them,
Yeah.
but I think at the same time in the arguments, that was kind of something that was a weakness rather than a strength, particularly because it's been done so many times. Mm-hmm. So it's between Clark and Dan for me. And going into the pitches, I was, 50-50, but I think that, because in my mind, I was waiting to hear, like, how is that character going to fit into the horror genre? That just doesn't seem like a good fit. And Dan actually pitched me a good idea that seemed consistent with the character, seemed consistent with his backstory, with what I know of Hawkman, and he sold me. So I'm going to go with Dan also.
Dan, you and I in lockstep this whole game.
You and I.
Yeah, let's get a room already. Okay.
Yeah, can't wait to come in and mess it up.
Danielle, what's everybody saying?
All right, so for the polls, we had John Constantine at 51%, Zatanna at 26%, Hawkman at 21%. We had some really interesting things. A lot of people, I'm butchering this. I'm a reader. I don't hear these things a lot.
Yeah.
So Etrigan the Demon was one that got a lot. Swamp Thing, overwhelming.
Yep.
We had in the chat, Jay, I want to say this is like JL123 Us said Mixpidalic, which I thought was, I think that could be a really interesting horror movie. And then on Twitter, at Corin _W said it's unconventional, but give us a Batman horror mystery thriller. Show us why Batman is the world's greatest detective. It'd be cool with someone taking the Court of Owls and turning it into gothic horror. Hashtag Owl Nation.
Hoot hoot.
Also, for all of y'all, there is a really good, for John Constantine's 40th birthday, he invited over Zatanna and Swamp Thing and a bunch of their friends, and it's a really good, fun comic, so everyone should read it.
Awesome. Thank you for the info, Danielle. So we're all tied up, 1-1-1. That means we go to a tiebreaker.
Oh, boy.
Oh, yeah. This is truly a great moment in sports. Okay. So here are tiebreaker rules. So you, each of you will give an answer, and then you will argue it speed round style. You'll each get 20 seconds, and then we'll go back around 10 seconds, 10 seconds, 10-second rebuttals, okay? And the first person to speak will answer first, second person to speak will answer second, third person, etc. Okay? You guys feeling it? You ready to rock?
Mm-hmm. Ready as I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
Tie break time. And then we will chime in with the one who will not continue on to the speed round, okay? We will let you know who will not continue. Dave Bautista's MCU future is in doubt. So if he doesn't continue on with Guardians, if he were to leave Marvel, who should he play in the DC universe?
Bane.
Okay, with Bane.
I'm going to go with Etrigan, the Demon.
Etrigan the Demon. And Ace.
Hades.
Hades. Okay. Clark answered first with Bane. She'll get 20 seconds. Then Dan. Then Ace.
So obviously Dave Bautista is a big guy, and that's one of the easier ways that you could associate him with a character like Bane. But I would argue that since Dave Bautista has been really pursuing acting, he has become a really talented performer. I look to his performance in something like Hotel Artemis, where he showed a lot of range, he showed a lot of depth, and he showed a lot of empathy.
Dan.
Dave Bautista is a mountain range of a man, and he has an incredible range as an actor, which is why I think his build and his talent would be ideal for Etrigan the Demon, this horrifying hell beast that speaks in rhyme. I think it'd be a really fascinating thing. We already know he's accustomed to body paint from Guardians of the Galaxy, so it wouldn't be an issue for him in that regard, but it would stretch him from what we've seen before in superhero cinema.
Bautista of Hades would be the most compelling, because not only would he face off against Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman, which is already a villain in the Wonder Woman universe, he would have a different take on Hades, and finally he can embody a character that is just pure evil and not fun and loving like Drax is. He would do something different, and it's the most different from these three options, because as Hades, he is just simply pure evil.
At the end of the day, with both of these arguments, I think that Dave Bautista he has more range than maybe you guys are giving him credit for, and I want to see him truly, truly shine and excel in a nuanced character.
Why hide him behind the mask? I cared about him long before that. I want to see him as a bloodthirsty demon fighting evil and being evil himself, having to be reined in his darkest impulse. I think that'd be fabulous.
At the end of the day, Etrigan the Demon still has a fun-loving character within himself, and we've already seen a Bane with Tom Hardy. He would just get compared to that. With this, it's different, it's new, and it's pure evil. I feel like that's the most range that he would have.
Woo! Woo, man, you guys could keep going and going. That was one of the most satisfying speed round tiebreaker slash speed rounds. That was great. I'm going to go to Danielle Radford.
Ooh, it's fine. Yeah, these are really good arguments. I would say that as much as I appreciated both the Bane argument and the Etrigan argument, you were both essentially making the same argument and attacking each other for not making the same argument, because you both argued that there is range and there is subtlety, whereas with Ace, he came at it from the different angle of it could be more evil, not necessarily fun-loving. So I'm going to go with Ace, just because you guys great arguments, but
Ace,
sorry.
I thought Ace did great, but
Sorry,
who doesn't move on?
I don't want to do this.
I know they all were so good.
Okay, so I again, out of both of these are great. I felt like there wasn't a lot of listening to each other in this, but I think that Dan had a better argument, so I'm going to have to go with Clark.
All right. Dan Murrell.
So you pick Ace and Dan to move forward.
Ace and Dan to move forward.
I think that everyone had a good basis for their argument. However, there were two competitors that were able to sell both their actor and their character. And those two for me were Dan and Ace. I loved Clark's pick, but I felt like, Clark, your argument was mostly selling me on Bautista, which isn't a bad thing, but I just feel like those two guys really folded in why they work for that character specifically, and there was that extra level that for me would advance those two to the final.
All right, so it is settled then. Ace and Dan are moving on to the speed round. Clark, you brought mad knowledge and great answers all day long. Thank you so much. This is like, as far as just like three competitors, 1-1-1, and then that tiebreak, this is one of the closest movie fights I've ever been privy to. Congrats everybody for just impressive arguments all around. And let's move to the speed round. Same rules apply as the tiebreak question. 20 seconds, 20 seconds. The first person to answer will go first, and then 10-second rebuttals after your 20-second initial answers. Dan, Ace,
Yes.
Y'all ready for this?
Yes.
Do it.
Okay. Here is the first question.
Way to not get us stuck on copyright there. Perfect. Sounded like it.
I think that jingle was public domain.
Sorry, Mortal Kombat. Okay. The Predator, it's opening this weekend. Aside from Batman, who has fought them in comics, what DC hero should fight a Predator in a movie?
Oh, Green Arrow.
Deathstroke.
Green Arrow and Deathstroke. Okay, Dan, you spoke first, so 20 seconds begin when you speak now.
In the comics, Batman has gone up against the Predator before, but I think Green Arrow would be incredible because it would be Hunter versus Hunter. It would be truly one of the fairest combatants for a Predator to face, and they are a society founded on finding the worthiest opponent possible. So naturally, if you look at something like Mike Grell's Longbow Hunters arc, if you take that version of Green Arrow, put him against a Predator in the jungle, or even in an urban environment, you would get...
What made the first Predator movie good is that we had Arnold Schwarzenegger embody the greatest killer on Earth. The greatest killer in the DC comics is Deathstroke, and Deathstroke has the talent, whether it be physically, whether it be in weapons, to match the Predator. And I feel like that's a much more compelling argument than simply Green Arrow, who has much more of one weapon, which is the bow and arrow, whereas Deathstroke has the sword, the bow staff.
The only sympathetic thing about Deathstroke is the shade of silver spray paint they put on Joe Manganiello's beard. Green Arrow is a heroic character you want to root for. Deathstroke is a character that you want to get beaten by Teen Titans.
At the end of the day, you want to see killer versus killer, and no one has the more killer element than Deathstroke, and Predator is simply just a guy in a mask as well. It's the ultimate battle that every fan wants to see. And for Green Arrow, I feel like we've already seen too much of it.
Time. Okay. Wow. Damn. Ugh. You know, I feel like it came down to the rebuttals there for me, and Dan, positing that hero versus the villain hunter really swayed me. Whereas what you were describing, I feel like we kind of had that in sort of a Alien versus Predator kind of way. You were giving me echoes of that, so I go Dan on this one, even though it was super close. I love listening to you guys talk comics. That was great. Danielle.
It's. As much as I really love the argument about the weapons and the best killer, I really was compelled by the idea of the Hunter versus Hunter. So I'm going to have to go with Green Arrow on that one.
All right, Dan Casey takes that one. Dan is up 2-1. 2-1. All right, question number 2 of the speed round. This is a fun one. Worst DC villain performance from any DC movie. Worst villain performance in any DC movie.
This is not hard, you guys.
Nigel Thornberry, whatever his face is, David Thewlis as Ares.
Nigel Thornberry.
I'm gonna say my least favorite, and I'm sorry, Jesse Eisenberg is Lex Luthor.
That's the right answer.
All right. Okay, so we have David Thewlis from Wonder Woman versus Jesse Eisenberg from various DCEU. All right, Dan, you spoke first. 20 seconds begins when you speak now.
David Thewlis isn't aggressively bad as Ares. He's sneakily bad. It sneaks up on you in the dead of night, wakes you up from your slumber, makes you think, what the entire fuck was he doing with this character? Why did they Photoshop his face on that ripped young bod? It doesn't make any sense. He's an interesting character at first, but the more you think about it, it's just such lazy storytelling there. They could have done so much more with this character in the final reveal.
Lex Luthor is the most iconic Superman hero there is. He is serious, he is powerful, he has a heavy hand in the business and an intellectual hand as well. And Jesse Eisenberg makes him a cartoon. He makes him Jim Carrey's the Riddler. He makes him a goofy guy who basically can just make balloons. And it's one of those things that Lex Luthor has the most weight and the most power.
Say what you will about Jesse Eisenberg, but at least he commit. He knew what movie he was in. He's kind of like Eddie Redmayne in Jupiter Ascending. He's just swinging for the fences, and damn the results. Meanwhile, David Thewlis...
No one cared about Ares in the Wonder Woman movie. No one even knew who Ares was. Wonder Woman took that movie, whereas Jesse Eisenberg was overshadowing Ben Affleck and Henry Cavill in that movie because he was so freaking bad. He was in a completely different movie.
Time, all right. Yeah, Dan.
Ace took that one for me.
Yup, Ace took that one for me. We are locked up at 2-2. Man, this is a slugfest. Great. Here we go. Question number 3 of the speed round. Oh, what's the better sequel, Batman Returns or Superman 2?
Batman Returns.
Superman 2?
Yeah, that's the one you got by default.
Yeah.
Dan spoke first again, so he will begin. The 20 seconds will begin whenever you speak now.
Batman Returns is iconic. Clarke said it herself earlier with her argument about why Michelle Pfeiffer gave the best performance. And you could say that about any one of these characters in there. Danny DeVito as the Penguin. You get Max Schreck, Christopher Walken in that performance. His plot is dumb, but the movie stands the test of time, recontextualizing Batman in a way that we hadn't seen him before. A little bit in Tim Burton's first Batman movie, but this really pushed the envelope and redefines what we think.
In Superman 2, Christopher Reeves has more exploration within his character. He's questioning himself as Superman. He's questioning himself as a being himself because he sees the different side of a Kryptonian and the evil that a Kryptonian can bring and the power that can wield against humanity. So he has to question whether to value himself or to value humanity, and that is what Superman 2 brings within the Christopher Reeves Superman.
Look, if I want to question my humanity, I'll just go to Christmas dinner with my family. If I want to have a good time at Christmas, I'll put on Batman Returns because it's a Christmas movie. Takes place then, it takes the cake, it's a
Batman Returns may be a Christmas movie, but the better sequel is Superman because you're following up a character as Superman, and to see his emotional high, we get to see the emotional low, and that's what we want to see in a sequel, as we want to see a character explored.
Time. Okay. Wow. Man, both. I love both of those movies. Danielle.
Oh, I have to go with Ace for Superman 2, which hurts me deep in my face.
I also am going to go with Ace here. I feel like the Christmas movie did not serve your argument, whereas...
Look, you can watch it at Hanukkah too. It's the same time, and I can can't say that because I've been on Birthright.
As a Jew, I don't think.
I do both.
But yeah, you laid out good points in your opening argument, but yeah.
I don't know if I did.
I mean, the Danny DeVito's Penguin is so creepy and good. But yeah, Ace, you had the better overall take on the film. All right, so it is Ace with game point right now, okay? Ace takes the whole ball of wax. Dan, you need this to tie him up. Question for the speed round. What DC character should get a romantic comedy spin-off?
Booster Gold.
Ace.
Lois and Clark.
Could we take that's two
we
characters?
have to
Yeah, we
pick
need one
We gotta pick
character.
one
Superman.
character.
Superman.
Yeah.
Okay. Booster Gold and Superman. Dan, you answer first again, so 20 seconds begin when you speak now.
Any good romantic comedy focuses on a protagonist who is so deeply flawed that the prospect of love seems biologically impossible for them. And no one embodies that more than Booster Gold, a reality star from the future who manufactures crimes for himself to stop. He is the wisecracking best friend Skeets. He has to go back in time to learn how to be a hero and learn how to be a human, one who can fall in love.
Superman and it has the most iconic relationship, which is with Lois Lane. And if anything, we want to see the relationship between the stubborn and so many quirks that Lois brings and the much more bumbling and simple Clark Kent and her realizing that he is Superman. And we can also have conflict with Wonder Woman coming in because we know that she brings a relationship with him as well.
I don't think a love triangle between Lois and Wonder Woman is what you want to go with for a romantic comedy. All we get from the comedy aspect of that is, oops, my glasses fell off. I'm bad at being a human. He just has to pretend. With Booster Gold, you get to see a genuinely flawed...
No one even knows who Booster Gold would be close to or what relationship he would be in, whereas Clark, we know it's going to be with Lois Lane, and we know he has that close ties with Wonder Woman. I feel like that's much more compelling, and it'd be comedic because we see the Clark Kent.
Time. All right. You know what? Ace started to pick up some ground, but I thought Dan laid out an unbeatable salvo in that first answer, so I'm going Dan. Danielle.
I have to agree. Yep.
All right, Dan, you tied it up. Wow. What?
Just let us die.
What a movie fight. What a movie fight. We are going to the very
live
last
here now.
question, the speed round. Yes, I will say it
Only
again.
12 more to go.
This is a great moment in sports, you guys. Okay, so the winner of this question takes the whole game. Which would you rather have seen more of? Brandon Routh's Superman or Val Kilmer's Batman?
Brendan Routh.
Val Kilmer.
Okay, so Ace, you say Brandon Routh. 20 seconds begin when you speak.
Brandon Routh showed a lot of charm in the first Superman Returns, and that's the biggest thing that we want to see in Superman. If you see him in Legends of Tomorrow, you see that charm, you see that wittiness, you see that happiness that he brings within all his characters. And I feel like if he had another chance within Superman, he can still pay tribute to the Christopher Reeves one and continue and make something different within this new era. And I feel like
You cannot hold Joel Schumacher against Val Kilmer. He is a great Bruce Wayne, he is a great Batman, and if given the chance in a script that would suit his unique set of talents, he could truly thrive. Whereas with Brandon Routh, why do you even want to see that? They had to recast him as a different hero entirely to make it work. You can hit that bell.
Val Kilmer gave the most unforgettable Batman performance that we know. At least Brandon Routh had his fans. At least Brandon Routh had an image that he was going for, and it paid tribute to that Christopher Reeves image. And if
Look, if Val Kilmer played World of Warcraft, people would be rallying against him, with him as well. I think that Val Kilmer was not, he was set up to fail. I think there's a lot more depth there that was not exposed in that movie, and I blame it on the script and the directing.
Woo! How about it? Dan Murrell.
Ooh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Man, very difficult. However, I think at the end, I was won over by Dan, so I'm going with Dan.
Okay.
It's the untapped potential argument held a little more weight for me than the living up to the legacy Reeve line.
Gotcha. You know what? I'm going to disagree and say Ace because I felt like Ace gave us more of what he liked about the performer, about that individual playing the character, whereas Dan talked about what was the odds against Val Kilmer a little bit more. So Ace swayed me. So it all comes down to Danielle Radford.
Oh boy.
Oh, I hate you all. Okay, again, both really good arguments. I do have to say that I was less swayed by the paying tribute argument, because to me that just tells me that you're doing the same thing that someone else has already done, because again it's paying tribute. So yeah, I also have to go with the untapped potential argument, so I'm going with Dan.
Dan Casey, you are today's Movie Fights winner, and I applaud you and everybody sitting at this table except myself. You guys, awesome work.
I just blacked back in. What happened?
You won.
Oh God. Jesus.
Wow, what a speed round, what a match. Dan, congratulations.
Thank you.
And you all just flexed a lot of knowledge today. Yeah, you came out and flexed on them. But Dan, congrats. Go ahead and plug some stuff and yeah, say whatever you feel.
I would love to plug my wonderful competitors. Honestly, like, I can't believe that I'm here right now because, like, this was really hard. I have a headache right now, and my head is full of blood. Please check out Ace's podcast. Watch Clark on, what Making of?
The Meaning of.
The Meaning of, excuse me. The Meaning of podcast. Watch Clark on DC Universe. It's going to be awesome. You can find me on Nerdist. I'm online as well, but don't look at me. Look at these two amazing competitors. I'm so happy to be here with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So gracious and victory. Well fought. Clark, you showed us why you were hosting a DC show. Your knowledge was incredible and your answers were eloquent and so much fun. Please go ahead and tell us more about upcoming the DC launch and where we can find you.
Yeah, well, DC Universe is available on Batman Day, September 15th, Saturday, and I'm going to Fantastic Fest next week. So I will be seeing all the fun genre, horror, exploitation things, big and small. So please go ahead and give me a follow on Instagram at ClarkWolf, Clark with an E, Wolf in the. I'll be doing reactions, no spoilers, of course, for everything from Halloween to little tiny baby things that maybe you've never heard of.
Are they showing Mandy there?
They are.
If you haven't seen it, go see Mandy.
I'm so excited. I haven't gotten to see it yet, so I'm
Awesome.
really excited.
I mean, a Nick Cage movie that's actually getting good, buzz.
Love Nick Cage.
I'm excited about that. Clark, thank you so much.
You, sir.
Ace, you brought it, and awesome stuff. Fun to listen to all day long. Please go ahead and tell us where you can find you.
Find me on Twitter and Instagram at Squad Leader Ace. I talk about anime a lot about Attack on Titan, and obviously the Meaning of podcast. We just hit episode 50 of the Meaning of podcast, so that's a big milestone for us.
Yeah.
Check us out on the Collider podcast YouTube channel as well.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Matt. Oh, so good. Dan Murrell. Where's the belt currently?
Where's the belt currently?
Yes.
It's in my possession.
Yes.
That's all I'll say.
Oh yeah.
I keep it in a safe place. I polish it.
Yeah, you don't want to let you don't want to let like evil ninjas know where to like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to tell people where they can come grab the belt. It's safe.
Right on. Dan, where can they find you?
Here, every week, mostly on Twitter, at Murrell Dan on Screen Junkies News almost every morning on SJU, and as of I noticed last night, you can find me and Roth Cornett on Rotten Tomatoes. Awesome. Which is crazy. I didn't know that was going to happen.
Hashtag certified.
Yeah, well, not quite. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let's say that. Yeah. Now I got to work on getting my picture on there. I don't know how you do that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's super. That's really fun.
Well deserved. Well deserved.
Thank you.
Glad to hear it, brother. Danielle Radford, thank you for just being the voice of the people and chiming in with your own opinions and deciding the whole damn thing. Danielle, please go ahead and plug some stuff.
Just as per usual, you guys can see me here every Thursday. You can check out my wrestling podcast, Tights and Fights, which comes out on Thursdays. I have opened a Patreon. The tiers are really small because I know the worth of y'all listening to me talk about wrestling, and it is $5 capped. So find me on Patreon. We do some hangouts and some other really fun stuff.
Awesome. I'm Hal Rudnick. Find me on Twitter and Instagram at at Hal Rudnick. If you are in Los Angeles, come to the UCB Theater on Saturday night, this Saturday, the 15th at 11:59 p.m. for the Tournament of Nerds. We are having our big tag team battle show. It's going to be off the charts, super fun. And again, follow me on all social medias at Hal Rudnick. I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank Billy Biz and JTE in the booth. And again, all of these awesome fighters. I want to go home and just click on this and watch it again because your answers were so damn good. Please tune in next week. Thanks for watching Movie Fights. Bye-bye.